that's not right. Okay, welcome to my shop, everyone. I'm going to be doing a little work on this generator today. Kind of picked this one as a first video because it's suffering an ailment that is common to a lot of stuff, like a generator, mower, garden tractor, you know, motorcycles, you name it. This generator, it's a Generac Megaforce 6500. It has fuel issues. Modern gas is absolutely filled with ethanol, and this one is set for a while with some bad gas in its carb, and it is no longer in a running condition. So we're going to return it to a running condition, clean it up good, and send it back home. So go ahead and get the camera here, get an angle so you can see what I'm doing, and I'll kind of explain what I'm doing as I'm doing it and the whys. Alright, I've got it up on a lift here. This is like a motorcycle, ATV, long tractor lift. Got it tied off pretty well. I wouldn't recommend this. It's kind of tied up with a strap just to make sure that it doesn't slide off. This thing is pretty heavy. I actually lifted this and put it in the back of my truck. Did not have my trailer at the time, and I thoroughly regretted it. We're going to start by having a look inside the air filter. This is the intake. You've got your air filter. You know, so you follow a big plastic box on the outside of your small engine, odds are that's where you're going to find your air filter, and behind that's going to be the intake where the carburetor is, and that, at least for most small engines, is the business side of things. This particular engine kind of looks like a Honda clone. It may be, it's stamped Generac. It does not look like a Briggs design, so it most likely is a takeoff on a Honda. I don't recognize the overhead valve plate, or cover rather. That's kind of an unusual shape, but you know, these designs, and specifically ones that look like this guy, you know, you see them all over the place. There's kind of ubiquitous pressure washers, generators, tillers, you name it. But let's go ahead and get cracking. I'm going to start right here. Before we are done, I'm going to need to drain everything out of the gas tank right up here. I'm leaned over it, just took the cap off and smelled it. And you know, you can pretty much name that song in one note. You can smell it. It's just an awful smell, old gas. It smells like turpentine, or it's a really odd smell. Put that there, apparently. And it smells like old gas on the filter, and you actually see some. That looks like it may be actually, yeah, it's a little gas, you can see that. Some carbon accumulation is actually on the filter. Let's see too often. Gonna smell gas here, so not too big of a deal. We should be able to get this off pretty quick, and it's a 10 millimeter in there. I'm just going to assume that this is metric, which is probably not. If it is indeed Chinese, that's not a wild assumption. Chinese parts and engines. Seems to get a lot of grease, but I don't know. Their clones are pretty great, and really no different than a modern engine like a Briggs or a Honda or anything. They've gotten really good at producing the clones. At one point, they were counterfeits. Then they became clones, and if they ever start producing their own designs, they're going to have some trouble. Little washers in there we don't want to drop off, because we'll have to chase those around the floor. And as anyone who's ever worked on any engine knows, if you drop one of these on the floor, it disappears into a void, and sometimes it's never seen again. Two more nuts holding on down there. Washers don't want to float off. So, oh, there's one. Oh, they're convinced to stay. Remind me those washers are on there when I pull this plastic off so I don't lose it. Oh, there's one. And to the form, it sounds like I heard it 10 feet away. It's alright, chase it down. There's a little rubber stop there. Got here. Got a low oil indicator here. I've also got a run stop switch here. Got a pretty good fuel leak back here. Assuming that's coming off the bowl, but that you can smell it there. We're just going to let that hang for the moment, kind of out of the way, while we pull the carb the rest of the way off. I mean, I could pull these off with these little spade wiring connectors, but I don't want to brute force them off because, you know, once you do, they never seem to go back on quite as well unless you sort of pinch them shut. It just takes extra time that we don't need to spend. Try to be careful and get the gaskets off. While this gasket is wet with fuel, it does not seem to be. You can see there, it's got a little scum on it, but the gasket itself seems fine. And in my experience, aftermarket gaskets, you know, you can buy a full carb kit, it includes gaskets, everything else. It just never seemed to work as well. There's your choke. Of course, the choke meaning literally choking your engine. Stopping the air going through the intake. It's a little spring, and this bar is notched so that it actually gives you some settings. You know, full choke, you know, wide open half choke. We do have a fuel shutoff up here. Turn that to off. We're going to spill a little gas regardless of what we do, and this fuel shutoff itself may be clogged and useless at this point. We'll know in a minute. Go ahead and get this fuel line off. clips. I hate them. Clamps. Clips, clamps. You're going to hear me commit a lot of sins, or at least according to your opinion. I'm going to refer to some screws as bolts and some bolts as screws, although you can make solid arguments that a bolt is a screw is a bolt, just depending on which way you stand. So hopefully you're okay with that. We've got this hose right here. Looks like it's developed a little bit of dry rot. It's not too badly. I likely won't replace this anyway. We may wrap it with, like a little Gorilla Tape or some heat shrink if we have something that's that size, but it sits on top of this right here. You can't see it from your angle, but that's the valve cover. As the springs are underneath, as they move up and down to open your intake valve and your exhaust valve, that agitation builds pressure in here, and it actually pushes air out, and that air is, see, it goes right through here and is circulated back up into the engine itself, into the intake. The fact that there is gas in there makes me wonder if we haven't had gas here under the valve cover. Hopefully that's not the case. And maybe tell me that a gas oil mixture floated up there. Hopefully it didn't. That may indicate a little bit of there's a channel that goes by the push rods that are in there, and it may have a little bit of oil, but you certainly wouldn't want this much, and you wouldn't want it coming through this hose. It's really not enough, but to be honest, it doesn't feel wet in there. We will see. Got your throttle linkage there, and there is a spring which is off this arm. Those two things sort of work in concert to both govern the engine and also throttle it. The return spring puts it back into the correct position. As you can see, it's attached to this assembly back there. That's where your governor shaft is, right back here. That's how you'd adjust it. Stud is really loose. Both of them are. Alright. Here's our car. It is pretty funky just on the outside of it. This is really going to be step one. I would say that we're going to want to clean the carb first before we go any further. If you're wondering why I didn't test start it, I did pull the starter rope here, the lanyard. It did want to turn over, so normally, I might actually pour some gas down into the head via the spark plug, and just to test it, see if it would run. But this one actually has very few hours on it. We can be relatively certain that this is fuel related based on a look at this. I'm going to say probably it is. We're going to see what we can do to kind of recondition this very typical carburetor. I'd say it's a Zama or a Warburg. No, it's a Nicky. Sorry, my bad. I have a lot of these lying around here. Sometimes they're very easy to get back into running condition. Sometimes it's easier to buy a Chinese Nicky and slap it on there. It depends on how bad it is. And it is absolutely pouring gas. So I told you there's a lot of bad gas sitting in there. We'll get the camera set up over here at the workbench and start breaking this thing apart. Right there. Alright, here's our little Nicky carb of our generator. I'm going to try to keep this in view so you can see it. Gasket's in pretty good shape. This is the carb bowl. That would be filled with fuel and the carb's sitting upright. What we're looking for in there is to see how the needle valve looks. Odds are it's pretty gummy, stuck together. I'll explain to you how that works in just a moment, but go ahead and crack that off. I mean, you can already see the amount of trash that's in there. I don't know if it's easily visible, but there's a lot. Let's see. Well, relatively speaking, I've seen some that were absolutely solid on the inside, and that was just old fuel and remnants. Yeah, I mean, the yellowing and that is all just old fuel stuck there. As the carb sits upright, or the bowl, and the bowl fills with gas, it causes this float to come to this point, and at that point, there is underneath this float in the very back, right straight here, there's it's called the needle, but it's basically just a little. I think I've got one up here. That's it. It rises and falls as the level of gas in the bowl floats up and down. So with the bowl empty, the float goes down, the needle comes out, in comes fuel. As the float comes upwards and the bowl fills with gas, it shuts that off. That way it meters the amount of gas that's flowing in at any time, so that way that the bowl is not being constantly flooded with gas. When you have one of these that's stuck, you'll see gas flooding out through the emulsifier tube, running out of the body of your carb, through may come out of your air filter. Usually it's a pretty big mess. I'm going to pull that pin out, and there's your problem. This is a clean needle that I had up here, and that is not. If you think about it from the perspective of this is the method through which a 13 horsepower engine gets gas, this is a substantial amount of blockage. I mean, it's a very, very small passage, and people don't think of I guess they think of fuel traveling through more of a hose as opposed to one of these little bitty jets. Or down here, the needle seat, it's called, this little bitty piece of brass down there, and the opening is no bigger than that hinge pin. So that's the problem with this carb. We can say that almost definitively. I wouldn't think it would get any worse. What we're going to have to decide what to do now is this gasket right here, this rubber piece of rubber that you can see it's pressed down into here. A lot of times they dry out and they're really no good anymore. They're really meant to be, I think, a one-time use item. If we can get it out and get it back, put it back flat, and reuse it, that's ideal. It saves the customer money. They don't have to pay for a carb kit. So we're going to try to sort of coax it out of there, really. There's no other word for that. Gently. Use a dental pick, which I found is excellent for this job. Just need to get under the very edge of it anywhere we can. I'm trying not to trash it in the process. A lot of times they've sort of fallen victim to the same thing that's clogging this carb. And that's the bad fuel. You can supposedly put them in like some .3 fluid that would go into a car's transmission or brakes, but I've never really taken it that far. it's just been, I've never been in a position where I couldn't just order another gasket for it. So if I get there, I'll test it. It's still fairly pliable. You can see down into the needle seat. Get the thing to focus. Let me get the camera off the stand and I'll show you. Right there. You can see the amount of gumminess that's kind of on the outside of it. That has to be cleaned. All of this, carb, float, and all is going to go right in there. That is a large ultrasonic carb cleaner. And we'll soak it for a little bit. Get this thing up to temperature and drop it in there. Should clean it really quickly and not be quite as harsh as some other methods of cleaning, especially considering those things are just pot metal. They're pretty soft and they tend to have a finish on them from the factory. I've never understood that. I'm perfectly fine with a carb being functional and not shiny. I don't know why that would matter, but aesthetics are everything, I guess. We're gonna bring that up to temperature. I'm going to drop these in the basket over there, and I will show you what this thing looks like when we get it back. And you can see how yellow the float is, just how lousy that is in general. And it is absolutely filthy. See if we can't get it back into fighting shape. Okay, back at the carb. Two things happened. One, I let the carb soak. The other thing was that a day has passed while I did some suspension work on my wife's car. So, carb looks much better. The needle leaves a little something to be desired. We're going to see what we can do with it real quickly here. I mean, it is just funky. As you can see, much better overall. Got a little bit of grime down on the seat there, but overall, that's what we're looking for. Okay, got a little carb cleaner here. We're going to see if we can't defunk this needle. You don't want to leave one of the carb cleaner is great, an ultrasound carb cleaner, especially for the worst of it. Otherwise, you're kind of left to chip away at it with a pick or whatever tool you little brush, and that can go into hours of work. When this will take the bulk of the grime off, you don't have to worry about scoring any of the surfaces that sort of come back to haunt you. These are pot metal, which I believe is some kind of alloy. It's just another way of saying cheap metal. I mean, for such a essential part of your engine's ability to intake the right fuel-air mixture, they get sort of short shrift sometimes, but if you can see that right there, but I'm holding it in the right place. Still pretty gummy. Just want to make sure that that's varnish and it's nothing actually stinky. Did I say stinky? Sticky. Stinky. It probably was stinky. It doesn't feel like it. We're going to put a little oil down there in the seat before we go any further. There's your float, which looks considerably better than it did. This is a plastic float. Some of the older carbs have a metal float, and they are prone to, like anything metal, submerged, springing a leak. And of course, that's no good. Get a Q-tip. Right down there's the seat, the needle seat, so I'm just going to make sure that's good and cleaned, and then we're not leaving any Q-tip remnants behind. Q-tip. It's like Kleenex. It's one brand that is synonymous with the thing, even though Q-tip is a brand. This would be a swab, I guess. That is all the rambling I'll do for right now. Okay. Let me get our pen. Make sure it is free of funk as well. To be honest with you, we just need a little fuel to start moving through the passage, and we're going to take a little Marvel, which is a pretty good lubricant, and it suits this purpose just fine. We're just going to lubricate that surface right there and the needle so we can make sure that it's traveling up and down as it should be in there. The needle goes into, if you can see down here on the bottom, there's a little bitty space to hang it. So you put the top in right there, so it dangles like that. I like that. On older floats, this piece right here can be bent upwards or downwards, and that you know, adjusts the point where the float reaches its maximum height and stops the gas off. Turns it off. And that's something you'll just have to, right there, what just happened, will happen 15 times. We're just going to put the needle down in there, put the float where it needs to be, and work the pin through after. Keep forgetting. I'm filming this, so. Okay, so this would simulate full. So we need to try to blow through here. This is where the fuel goes in, and make sure that no air gets by. No air got by. Drop it down. Now it needs gas, and you can hear it coming right out through there. Everything else looks pretty good. And then we're going to try to replace this gasket. You know, we kind of salvaged the gasket. And it looks like it's still going to lie flat, which is good news for us. There's the bulb back on. That gasket still looks okay. The trick here, of course, will be to line the bowl up so it's exactly in its notch, and obviously, oops. So the gasket actually does its worth. I'm tongue-tied right now. I'm having a brain fart about what size that was. There you go. We don't want to over torque this, we just want it snug enough. There's our clean carb. Looks much better than it did. I actually wiped it out real carefully with a rag after I took it out. And as I said, the ultrasonic cleaner is great. It's a handy thing to have. You're still going to be left with a little bit of hand work, like what just happened right there, but overall, the carb is in a much better condition than it was. And you know, as we could tell when we actually took it off the studs, it was in pretty bad shape over there, leaking gas. It was all over the wiring, etc. That's probably not going to hurt the wiring. Everything else just needs to be wiped down, but I can guarantee with almost certainty that we'll get this running in short order after cleaning this car. Okay, back around to the engine side of things. At first I was a little concerned about these. I guess they recess in the back. Normally you don't see a stud for a carburetor coming off an engine with this much play in it. It's odd. You've got this little Bakelite, that's what it feels like. It's certainly a hard plastic. It's like a boot on the intake. The carb fits up against it, but you know, like I said, usually you don't run into one that has that much play. They're usually pretty stiff, and as a matter of fact, you want to be really careful not to hit these. You can leave them exactly as they are, because normally they are screwed directly into the block, and you could wind up damaging the where it's been bored to accommodate these. You know, and then you'll have to wind up, that would just be a can of worms. You'd have to tap it, find some larger studs to go in it, and then you know, carburetor would have to be opened up to accommodate these larger studs, but it does not appear to be the case. I noticed these when I came in yesterday and thought, man, that's weird. Thought I may have to pull this off and tighten them from the back side, but that does not appear to be the case. So we do need to get the bad gas out of here though. Moment. Let me get my can. All right. See how much we can get out of here. And it could be fresher gas added on top of a fuel tank that's dirty, but it's hard to make that smell determination. So we're just going to drain it all out of there if we can. Hate to waste good fuel, but let that drain out. I don't think there was very much in there, so. Maybe I'll fast forward this part, huh? There may have been more gas than I thought. In fact, whoever put fuel in it after the fact may have added a little stabilizer in there. Alright. Need our gaskets. That in a second. One thing I will say, it's oftentimes easier to flex your throttle here than to try to get it on your linkage. To get it on this post, you got this little plastic little grommet right there. If you break one of those out, believe it or not, the hole obviously is going to be a little bit larger that it drops into. And that does make a difference. I mean, it's minute, but you'll find yourself running a little bit too rich, a little bit too lean. You just don't have the same tolerance. And while it's not a stopping point, it's something that you would notice over time. So I try to preserve those when at all possible. Luckily enough, we don't have a little crooked arm here in the end responsible for pushing this back and forth. It's just nice and straight there. That's ideal for our purposes. Makes it a lot easier for us. Otherwise, we would want to attach the linkage before we actually slid the throttle on the posts. Ask me how I learned that. You know, you can bend these things so easily. And some of them just, once bent, even if you straighten it, just never seems to work correctly again. Also, we're going to get our return spring on there. We actually do it first since it's a little bit dicier of the two. There we go. Now let's pick up the other gasket I just dropped. Butterfingering. We don't have too much floor dust off there. Wiggle the plastic cover back on here. Thank you. These wiggling posts are still hard to get my head around, but I guess if that's the way it is, that's the way it is. That started. And this is a test fire. If we need to go back and adjust anything, we will. We just want to make sure that this thing's going to run properly and the carb cleaned out. And we'll test everything, clean it up, make it look nice and pretty. Because, as everybody knows, once you wash a car, it runs better, right? The same should be true for these. That's a joke. Somewhere out there, someone immediately said, "By God, that's crazy talk." And again, be careful here not to over torque. Meaning, you know, don't over tighten. I think just a hair beyond finger snugness for this side, so you can be assured it won't walk itself out, is perfectly fine. Gonna put this cover on temporarily. Still got with our air filter, so at least for testing purposes it will be as close to actual running conditions. We're obviously gonna have to swap that filter out as well. Small engine, or any engine really, at least the internal combustion type. Needs air, gas, and spark. So these things are going to be a long tighten. I don't want to round them off, so let's just do this. Someone has thoughtfully cut a slut. All right. Pull our dipstick out, which is frozen in place. With only 30 hours used on this, I'm going to assume this is probably the factory detergent oil. I'd be surprised if it were otherwise. It certainly smells like it. As a matter of fact, this oil, I'll show you a quick look at this stuff. You can see how thin and black this is. Based on the smell, that is gasoline in the oil. You know, our carb is actually stuck together So because of that, what will happen is the carb will get itself stuck flooding, and at some point it will actually push gas into the crankcase, which thins the oil, and that's a bad condition for it to be in. So we're going to pull that plug, drain all the oil into a pan, and replace it with fresh oil before we even try to start it. There's no point right now and try to start with that oil in there. It's bad for it. The stuff, its viscosity, you know, the quality of protection is way down. So we're going to get that out of there real quick. That's what I meant by thin. I wish I'd gotten it when it first started coming out. I mean, this oil is like, it's just water. You can hear it dribbling there. That's a really, really large amount of gas. And of course, true to form, drop the plug in there. That's like a rule. We'll fish it out in a moment. Get it back in there. But, you know, oil is not supposed to sound like someone, you know, pouring water or gas. You can hear it like that. So, hopefully no damage done. Usually when that happens, you get a lot of smoke. And as a matter of fact, most of the time they will, you know, a small engine will not run. Plugs will be fouled. It's almost too difficult to run it in that state. So we'll give it a moment to empty out, put some fresh oil in it, and take it from there. Okay, we got all of our, there's my glove from retrieving the oil plug, which 50-50 chance I'll do that on any given day. Man's got to know his limitations. Pulled the plug, drained all the oil. We're going to put some fresh in there. Also over here, changed the filter. You know, obviously this filter was in the same condition, just smelled like old ruined gas. Next step will be to get our plug out of there. If we can. It's kind of an awkward angle. One second. Come on out of there. Of course, you never need to take out a spark plug until your hand is entirely covered in oil. But you know, obviously I used a glove a moment ago, but it is what it is. Let's see if this suits us any better. A little bit. At least we're spinning. Wow. Not budging right there. Sorry for all that flipping, fluffing. Alright, let's pull the plug out, see what we have in there. It's in a super tight spot. This particular ratchet is helpful. Let's see it. It's got 84 teeth. It gets a lot of action in a very small area, so. Let's see if I can focus here. Well, that's a pretty foul plug. Hold on 1 second. Alright, there's the same plug. That's after obviously being on my wire wheel for just a minute. You know, nothing crazy. Just brushed a little of the soot off at the carbon. I also used a little electronic cleaner on it, which carb cleaner would work just as well. Cleared off the end here, you know, and not meaning to be controversial in any sense, but I think plugs a lot of times are sort of treated like, you know, two-stroke engines for weed eaters or, you know, leaf blowers, and that, hey, this thing, it's not working right now, we should throw it out. These are kind of a binary condition. It either works or it doesn't. I mean, obviously your gap can be set incorrectly. That could cause you some problems with sparking. But, you know, just cleaning one of these up, just taking a moment, and it will spark, and it'll spark just fine again. This engine, again, with only 30 hours on it, looks like it was tried to start in the condition that it was in, and it wasn't bad. Well, I missed the spot. Catch that. But in the condition it was then, I doubt that this plug is just ready to chunk. You're saving the customer money. You're saving the resources that are necessary to produce one of these. There's just no reason to throw it away. So it's a preachy moment, I guess. Okay. Got our got our plug cap back on. Oil filter. There's your oil fill. Apparently it's a little over a quart for this engine. I will typically fill until I can see the oil when I look down the spout. That's not exactly scientific. It has always served me well. In the case of these, we're going to see right now if this is going to give us any grief. It's got a low oil shutoff on it, and while that's a good thing, it's also a bad thing. As sludge settles down here in the crankcase, a lot of times it will cause the float that is inside there to stick to the bottom, and when that happens, it sort of simulates there being no oil in the engine, and there's no oil in the engine. It grounds it out. You don't get a spark, and the only way to test it is then to remove your low oil indicator. You can just take the wire off it. For something like a generator, especially in around where I'm from, they're not going to get used a lot. Power outages mostly. You know, maybe I don't know. I suppose you could take one of these camping. Not quite as heavy use as some places where there are consistent long-term power outages. So it might not be too much of an issue. I would think that power would be restored long before you had the chance to burn off all your oil. But, you know, just for safety's sake, why not? But we're going to put a little gas in there, Turn our gas back on and see if we can't get this thing to turn over. Let's move everything off the top. It's about to fall off the starts, and hopefully it won't fall off the stand. We're going to test that. Alright, I've got everything removed from the top that's going to fall on top of this while we're testing this. Hopefully the sucker won't fall off the stand. If it does, you'll see some funny stuff in just a second. Fuel shut off back around. I'd say we're all good. Well, it's running a little uneven. You know, there were many gas in the line. It's probably pretty nasty. What I'll probably do is put some more fresh gas in it, leave it, let it sit for a while. But you know, you can see there that the generator function of this generator works just fine. The alternator works. The only thing left to deal with, of course, is on our wheel right here. This wheel is unfortunately very much off the bead. Snugged it up there a little bit. We'll try, put a little air into it, and see if it'll jump back into position. It'll be a loud noise if you got good speakers. You may want to turn it down. Alright, well, it didn't work. Sometimes you can get them to jump up on the bead. It just depends on how wide this gap is. And, you know, a lot of times even with a gap, I mean, just the air moving through it, pop it a couple of times, it'll jump up on there. That's not going to be the case for this guy. We're going to have to pull it off and cinch it up on there. I may try a little manual adjustment, we'll call it, with a hammer from the backside, just to see if I can get it to sit evenly on the rim here. And if I can, then problem solved. In the meantime, I'm going to open the door. Obviously, I had an engine running indoors, and I don't want to get blue fingernails or start writing a religious text. So let me air it out, and then we'll come back and get this tire fixed. Okay, that is a done deal right there. Looks much better, runs better, nice and cleaned up, pretty, ready to go back home. So pick the next one out of the line and start in it. And while I'm thinking about it, there will be hopefully tons of content here. Things like generators, I've got a blower, got a big chainsaw, mowers, riding mowers, motorcycles, you name it. It'll all be here. So comment, like, subscribe. It's YouTube, so I'm sure I'll take a YouTube beating as is appropriate. But I hope you will come back. Thank you.